Hello, writers, and welcome to our second bend in our test prep unit. Today in session 7, we're going to be reviewing some of the things that you know about narrative writing. So do you remember how we started the year writing narratives? Yeah, what were some of your topics? Yes, I remember all of those fantastic stories. And what are some of the things that writers of powerful narratives do? Do you remember? And you can also think, too, about all the great narrative stories we've read this year, especially during our character studies unit. So today I want to teach you that whenever you're writing a narrative, it pays to draw on what you know about writing powerful narratives. Specifically, you can draw on what you know about story structure, about elaboration, and about craft. Because as good test takers, you might be asked to add some dialogue, some beginnings, and some endings to narrative pieces when you take your test. So let's take a little review. Here's one of our charts about narrative books. So, a beginning. I brought my reader into the world of the story. I may have done this by showing who was in the story, describing where the story was taking place, including small actions that were happening. In the middle, I showed what the main character did, and if it's a personal narrative, we know the main character is going to be me, and I helped readers picture what happened. I did that by telling it bit by bit, and by telling what I, or the character, did and said and thought. And at the end, we want to do our best to try to make a good ending and maybe put in a final action or feeling or lesson at the end. And today we're going to be working on crafting an ending together. So let's review a few short clips. I want to start by showing you our friends Moby and Annie. They do a great job of just kind of reminding us what a short story should have in it. And then I have a couple of guest teachers that are going to talk to us quickly just to refresh your memory about the introduction, adding events and dialogue, and your conclusion.
What's up, Moby? Cool. A unicorn. Are you writing another short story? What is a short story? A short story is a short piece of fiction with a beginning, middle, and end. Fiction can have imaginary characters or made-up settings. Fiction can also have events that didn't happen. Some short stories are very short, others are much longer. You can read a whole short story in one sitting. Right, but it takes longer to read a whole novel or a chapter book. Where can you get ideas for short stories? Sometimes I get ideas when I take a trip, or when I read articles in newspapers or magazines. I could also look through my diaries and journals for story ideas. Moby, you can read my short story, but not my diary. I get short story ideas from looking at old photos, too. Remember when we threw that birthday party for Senor Maurice? Maybe in my short story, the setting can be a birthday party. But I'll make all of the characters animals instead of people. What do you do before you write a short story? First, I like to brainstorm ideas for my story. I can use a story map to organize my thoughts. My main character will be Senor Maurice, and the setting will be a backyard. Most short stories have characters that face a problem. Sometimes, a character has to do something in order to solve a problem. And other times, a character has to grow and change to fix their problem. So, what problem should my main character face? I do remember that at my last birthday party, I was really worried that no one would show up. Maybe the main character in my story is afraid that no one will come to his party. Because it starts to rain. Now I can map out the plot. The plot is the sequence of events that happen in the story. Let's see. In my story, Senior Maurice sends out invitations to his party. On the day of the party, he spends a long time decorating the backyard. Suddenly, it begins to rain cats and dogs. Senior Maurice is sure his friends will never come. But his friends arrive, and Senior Maurice learns how much his friends care about him. Now that I've mapped out my story, I'm ready to write. How do you write a rough draft of a short story? I'm going to use my story map to help me write the rough draft. My main character is Senior Maurice, and he's a dog. No, wait. He's a dog with fluffy brown fur and long ears. It's important to write about how the characters feel, too. When Senior Maurice sees dark clouds, he worries the rain will ruin his party. I think about how things would look, taste, smell, or sound, too. The friends forget about the soggy cake. They bark and purr as they splash in the muddy puddles. Okay, I'm done writing. Almost. How do you finish writing a short story? After you're done with your rough draft, you've got to revise. When you revise, you make changes to your writing. When I revise, I make sure that I use the same tense throughout my story. Senior Maurice waited for his friends to arrive. Chester the cat comes to the party first. Sometimes I get confused and use different tenses. When I read my story out loud, it helps me to proofread. To proofread is to check for mistakes in writing. How's your story coming along, Moby? Hey, Moby, wait for me.
Writing an introduction. After brainstorming and planning a story, you can start writing an introduction. This can also be called an exposition. An introduction does a few important things. First, it helps get the reader interested in your story. If someone reads your introduction and it's kind of boring, do you think they'll keep reading? No way. An introduction also helps set the stage. You should introduce the character and setting to the reader, as well as set the mood for the story. So if your story is exciting, scary, sad, or sweet, readers should be able to figure that out right away from your introduction. So let's get started. First, get the reader interested. Here are a few ways to hook the reader's attention. You can start with a sound, like boom or bang, dialogue or a character talking, an exciting action, or a detailed description that activates the reader's senses. I'll start my story with a sound and dialogue. Boom! Oh no, was that thunder? Now I need to introduce my character and the setting. The reader should be able to visualize the character and setting, so I have to be descriptive. It would be boring if I just said, Super Megan is a superhero, she's in a big city at night. Instead, I'll write, Megan had been at a birthday party all evening and hadn't noticed that the weather was starting to get bad. She began walking, hoping she could make it home before the weather got worse. Soon, it was dark. The rain was pouring, and she began noticing lightning flashes reflecting off of all the tall buildings around her. She was worried. Uh-oh, maybe I should fly instead. Megan didn't like to use her superpowers all the time, but she decided that flying might help her get home more quickly and safely. She started spinning around and around to transform into Super Megan and then took off flying into the air. Did you notice how I set a suspenseful mood by describing the weather and the setting, and I gave the reader some information about Super Megan? My introduction is finished for now. When you write your introduction, remember to start with a hook to grab the reader's attention, and then set the stage by describing the main character, setting, and mood of the story. Events. In the last episode, I wrote an introduction for my fantasy story. Now I'm ready to write about the events. First, look back at your plan. I already included the first event in my introduction. Now I can't just say a pole got struck by lightning and fell into a car. Super Megan helped lift the pole off the car. No, I have to stretch out the problem because it should be the most exciting part. So let's see. Super Megan was flying as fast as she could, dodging trees, poles, and buildings, and suddenly she heard a big crash nearby. She wondered if she should stop and see what happened or just keep flying to get out of the storm. What if someone is hurt? She thought. She turned around and started flying up and down side streets. Finally, she noticed a crowd of people surrounding a car. She flew closer and saw that a light pole had been struck by lightning and had fallen onto a car with a man trapped inside. Did you notice that I didn't just tell the problem right away? I stretched it out to make it more suspenseful. Now I need to describe how the problem gets solved. But do you think it would be interesting if I just said, she flew over, lifted the pole off the car, the end? No, you should stretch out this part too. Here we go. Help! Screamed the man. Super Megan turned on her super strength powers. She tried to lift the pole, but it was so slippery from all of the rain still pouring down. She turned around to the others and yelled, "Everyone, grab on!" Together, they lifted the pole and pulled the man from the car. There we go. I've written the important events of the story, but I'm not quite finished yet.
Today we're going to be adding dialogue to our personal narratives. Now, we're not going to just add dialogue anywhere, but we want to add dialogue that develops either the events, characters, or both. And we're going to be doing something called extended dialogue. Extended dialogue is dialogue that goes back and forth between two or more people, and you're going to want to add at least 5 extended dialogues to your story in a logical place. Now, let me show you an example of what this could look like. Here's Jake and Sam, and they're going to have a conversation that goes back and forth 5 times. Watch. "Hey, my name's Jake. What's your name?" said Jake. "I'm Sam. Are you starting 4th grade this year too?" asked Sam. "Yeah, I've been at Wuhan International School for 3 years now. Did you just move to Wuhan?" asked Jake. Nice. I moved here from Taiwan this summer because my dad got a new job," responded Sam. Jake replied, "Cool, you'll like WIS." Now this is 5 exchanges of dialogue, but notice there's something interesting here. Enter is pressed every time a new person speaks. So every time a new person speaks dialogue, you have to press enter to start a new paragraph. Now this is unlike a normal paragraph, which has 4 to 5 sentences in a paragraph. With dialogue, you press enter every time a new person speaks. Now you don't want to just add dialogue anywhere. You want to make sure it's a logical place for your extended dialogue. As I read through my story, I found that the second paragraph was a great place to add dialogue because this is where Jake meets Sam. So you can have an interchange. So I can have extended dialogue here between Jake and Sam, and that should be fairly easy. Now let's see how I did this. Boom. There it is, but let's take a closer look. So I made sure it followed the story, and with each new dialogue, I made sure I added a new paragraph. So Sam starts out with, "What's your favorite movie?" So Jake starts out with, now you can see that I added a new paragraph every time someone spoke. Jake starts out with asking Sam, "What's your favorite movie?" Sam replies with, "I'm not sure, but Endgame or Black Panther." Jake replies with, "Cool." Jake replies with another dialogue. And here's something interesting that happens. There's a pause, and then Jake speaks again. If the same character says something back to back, you can keep it in the same paragraph. Sam finishes off the dialogue with saying, "Great idea, I love Legos," and then the story continues.
writing a closing. In the last episode, I wrote about all of the events in my story, including the problem and solution. Even though the problem is solved, I'm not quite finished. Every good story ends with a closing to wrap it up. There are many different ways you can end a story, but here are a few ideas you could use. Your closing might be a circular ending that refers back to something from the beginning of the story, a lesson the character learned, reference to a theme like friendship or courage, or a question that the reader can ponder after reading. I'd like to have my character learn a lesson and reference a theme of teamwork. Super Megan always thought flying and strength were her superpowers, but that day she learned that teamwork is a superpower too. Doesn't that sound like a good ending instead of just saying they lifted the pole and pulled a man from the car, the end? So when you write your closing, you can use one of these strategies to make your story sound complete.
All right, welcome back, writers. So now that you've kind of refreshed your memory about the different parts of a narrative, let's talk about revising. So remember, when you go to revise, you want to rewrite the important parts and continue to write bit by bit with details. Write twin sentences. What was it like when you did that? What did you do right after? What did you think, feel, say? Work on stretching out that information. And we always want to try to bring our character to life. Find parts where the character could say or do something, and it can really help you to try to act out and imagine what happened, and rewrite to tell exactly what the character did and said. And this is going to be really important, especially on the test. You're not going to be able to trade your writing and have peer conferences or conference with an adult. So it's important that you become your own writing partners, which means you need to read your writing like someone who's never read it before. Ask questions of yourself and really push yourself to go back and rewrite parts of your story. And I know you can do this because you've done some amazing work with revision this year. So let's practice together. I'm going to read you this short story. The Scary Walk to School. Goodbye, Mom, Sarah and I said as we walked out of the kitchen door. We held hands, swinging and skipping. I could feel Mom's eyes watching me as I walked out the door. Don't worry, Mom. We'll be fine, I said. She smiled, but I could tell she was a little nervous for us to be walking by ourselves. Sarah and I walked down the pathway to the sidewalk. Are you excited for your first day of school, Sarah? I asked. She smiled and said yes. I held Sarah's hand very tight. I'll show you the way, I said. I was proud to be walking my sister by myself. We walked down the sidewalk. We passed big trees and a garden. Just then I heard a growl and saw a dog walking down the street. I didn't see its owner anywhere. It was big and fierce-looking with long, sharp teeth. Grrr, it growled. I didn't want Sarah to get scared. Sarah grabbed my hand tighter. My hand started to get sweaty. I'm scared, Julie, she cried. Grrr. The dog stepped closer. It was as big as a pony with red eyes and huge teeth. Be brave, I said to myself. I grabbed Sarah's hand and shouted, Run! Whew. All right. So what are some of those powerful narrative writing moves that you see in this passage? I see some pretty awesome things. I really like the specific lines of dialogue. There's some back and forth dialogue that moves the story along. And I clearly know the setting, and there's details that help me picture all of that. So let's imagine that we were asked to continue this narrative and write a conclusion to it. How might that conclusion go? I mean, I could finish it off by just saying we escaped the dog and went to school. That would end the piece, right? But would that be a strong conclusion? No way. We didn't draw on everything we know about narrative writing. So I want to pull up this chart from earlier in the year. We used these when we were working on our personal narratives. And they can apply when we're writing imaginative narratives as well. Here's a few different tactics you might like, and these are a little different from the videos we watched earlier, so just to give you some more options. You might want to share a lesson. In this example, I said cutting your sister's hair can get you into big trouble. You might want to try to surprise the audience. When I opened the box, a puppy jumped out. I mean, maybe in that previous one we could surprise them, but it turns out the dog is really nice. Important action. I hug Mama hard and she hugs me back. Our important dialogue. We sure did get a soakin', Mama, I say. And we know that those were from some of our mentor texts earlier this year as well. So why don't we keep those strategies in mind while we try this together again? So I want you thinking as you look at this piece of text here, what did the character say? Maybe you could add in some dialogue to stretch out your conclusion. Stretch out the important parts so your reader can see everything that's happening. So if I'm going to continue what's happening after they see this dog, I really want to stretch it out. Think of those 5 senses. Put your reader in the story. And at the end, I want to go back especially and think of those strategies from above. Leave them with a powerful image in that last line. So when you're adding an ending and you're asked to do this on the test, you're adding more than one sentence, but you still want to make sure you have that powerful sentence at the very end. So again, I'm going to go through and read the story, and then I want you to work on whispering your ending out loud. The scary walk to school. Goodbye, Mom, Sarah and I said as we walked out of the kitchen door. We held hands, swinging and skipping. I could feel Mom's eyes watching me as I walked out the door. Don't worry, Mom. We'll be fine, I said. She smiled, but I could tell she was a little nervous for us to be walking by ourselves. Sarah and I walked down the pathway to the sidewalk. Are you excited for your first day of school, Sarah? I asked. She smiled and said yes. I held Sarah's hand very tight. I'll show you the way, I said. I was proud to be walking my sister by myself. We walked down the sidewalk. We passed big trees and a garden. Just then I heard a growl and saw a dog walking down the street. I didn't see its owner anywhere. It was big and fierce-looking with long, sharp teeth. Grrr, it growled. I didn't want Sarah to get scared. Sarah grabbed my hand tighter. My hand started to get sweaty. I'm scared, Julie, she cried. Grrr. The dog stepped closer. It was as big as a pony with red eyes and huge teeth. Be brave, I said to myself. I grabbed Sarah's hand and shouted, Run! those rehearsals sounded fantastic. So now you're going to go off and open your Ben 2 Digital Writer's Notebook and type out an ending to the story. You have about 10 minutes. Off you go. Before we move on for some more practice, let's go ahead and share some of those responses. And then after we share, you're going to go ahead and go back to your Ben2 Digital Writer's Notebook, and you'll find several short fiction passages. Follow the directions and read the questions on the slides to practice writing beginnings, endings, and dialogue. Awesome job today, writers!